I got a call in the operating room, which I typically don't answer, but I saw it was my brother, and I hung up. He called me back again. I was like, well, I better answer this. That might be wrong. He just sounded a little different. He was like, hey, Eric, I'm really struggling with depression, and I've been reading about ketamine for depression, and I think I'm going to give this a try. And I said, what are you talking about, ketamine? His mother had called me. She's like, my daughter just attempted suicide again, and she was in the hospital, and they had to pump her stomach. Wow. Horrible stuff, but I don't think she's going to make it through the week. She showed up with this shirt on that said Suicide Boys. I mean, just to see the change in this woman and how things happened. She was literally 24 hours away.
Who tends to respond best? Right now, many people are quietly battling depression, anxiety, PTSD, and chronic pain. They're doing the appointments, taking the medications, following the advice, and still feeling stuck, still feeling hopeless, still wondering why nothing is changing. My guest today works with those people, the ones who feel like they've run out of options, the ones who think they've tried everything. Dr. Eric Evans is an anesthesiologist, pain management specialist, and the medical director of Desert Sands Ketamine. He has over 30 years of experience using ketamine in clinical settings, and he's seen firsthand the impact that it can have on the people who need it most. This conversation is going to be about learning from someone who has been deeply involved in this therapy for decades, someone who understands the science, the process, the potential, and the real-world outcomes. So let's get into it. Thank you so much for coming on, and I appreciate this.
Awesome.
I'm really excited about just learning about this.
I thank you for having me on, Christian. I'm really excited to be here as well, and hopefully maybe entertain people, but also hopefully educate people about what it is we try to do with ketamine and how it may be something that could be helpful to them as well.
Yeah, I don't know that it's widely known because I just learned about it probably a year or so ago, and I didn't spend a lot of time diving into it, but I'd heard from some other people just success that they've had. And so, you know, when I saw yours pop up, I was like, oh, this is interesting. There's somebody here local. I had no idea. So I'm happy about that. But before we talk about the ketamine journey itself, I want to kind of understand you and kind of what led you down to that road of like anesthesiology and the pain management, kind of that process there.
Great question. I mean, I never thought I'd be where I am right now, dealing with people with mental health issues when I started medical school and residency and all of those kind of things. But I've always loved science. That's been a big deal for me. I mean, I grew up here in Southern Utah, and so there's also a big component of faith in Southern Utah, but science is what drew me to medicine and to going to medical school. And in medical school, I loved the idea of being able to know something. And I loved the idea of science and biology and physics and all of the things that go along with that. And so I went to University of Utah for medical school. My dad taught here at Dixie College. I grew up here in Southern Utah, so this is home for me.
Awesome.
And, but when I went up to University of Utah for medical school and then got out of there and went on to anesthesia, the thing that drew me to anesthesia was the idea of more immediate response. If you're an internist, you put someone on a blood pressure medicine, they come back in 2 weeks and you see what has happened. And that just didn't feel as quick as I needed to see reactions happen. There's this delay. I had a chemistry minor, and so I love to put chemicals together and see something happen. And when I did my anesthesia rotation, the things that really stood out to me, I thought I was going to be a general surgeon, actually. And as I was in medical school, I was in the honors program, and in that program, you get to go to function as an intern, maybe as a surgeon. And so I did that. And what I realized in that was that a lot of the surgeons were on their third marriages. A lot of surgeons were extremely stressed out. A lot of surgeons were not as healthy mentally as I wanted to be. And I've always heard the phrase, well, you know, birds of a feather kind of flock together. You kind of become the people that you hang out with. And as I did my anesthesia rotation to know, well, what's on the other side of the drape over there? What are they doing over there so I could be a better surgeon? As I got over there, I realized, oh my gosh, this is an amazing field. You're reassuring patients as you take them back to the OR. You're treating their anxiety. You're helping them at one of the most stressful times in their lives. And then the perioperative medicine around anesthesia is so fascinating. And as you're in the operating room, you're seeing instantaneous changes when you're dealing with patients' physiology and biology. And then a big component of anesthesia is pain relief and trying to help people not have pain.
Yeah.
And that really resonated with me. And then from just a more mental standpoint, I realized, my gosh, all these anesthesiologists are still on their first marriage, and they're still
Wow. Okay.
enjoying their lives, and they're still really mentally balanced. And what is the difference over here compared to what's going on over there? And so it just really drew me in. And so I went and told my advisor, "Hey, I think I'm going to have to change out of surgery into anesthesia." And that's what I did. And I just haven't looked back. And so I specialized in some things while I was in my anesthesia residency. I became chief resident, so I was able to kind of pick some of the things that I really loved. And so I picked pain management. I picked OB and cardiovascular anesthesia to specialize in. And then we moved back to Southern Utah here when I got done with training. And at that time, I was, I think, the sixth anesthesiologist here in Southern Utah. And I think we're now up to 35. So it's been really amazing to see the hospital grow, the medical community grow.
That's amazing that you recognize that too. Like you have this path that you're going down, and you're looking at the others that are on that path already or there, and you're like, might not be the life that I want. But
Just
then
not
here's
for me.
this other one, right? Yeah.
And
Love it.
and actually, to be fair to general surgeons and to surgeons in general, I came here to Southern Utah, and our surgeons here are the most well-adjusted, amazing people. And if had I maybe done surgery in a community like this, I probably would have, as a rotation, I probably would have continued down that path because we have amazing people here
Mhm.
at the institutional level, as professors. It just draws a different clientele to that area.
Yeah.
And so I kind of got a skewed view of that. But I still am so grateful that I went down this path.
When did ketamine kind of come into your world in the way that you use it now, or like what caused you to move into that?
Well, ketamine's been around for a long time. I started using it right out of medical school and then into my residency. Ketamine is such an amazing drug we call it a dissociative anesthetic. So when you give it to someone, their brain kind of dissociates and goes somewhere else. And then we can do really painful things like sew up kids or set bones or use it as part of a general anesthesia, as part of a cocktail of things. And it's extremely safe. The military uses it out on the battlefield because, unlike morphine or narcotics, it doesn't suppress your respiratory rate.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone's a soldier shot out on the battlefield, you can give them ketamine to relieve their pain and to relieve some of their suffering, and while you're transporting them somewhere. And their brain kind of dissociates elsewhere, and they feel it's an incredible painkiller as well.
Okay.
So that's how I had used it for almost, I guess, 25 years before I got into this particular aspect of ketamine.
Mm-hmm.
And it was part of just my almost everyday process. So I know that medicine extremely well. I'm really familiar with it. I was in the operating room. I still remember this, and I got a call in the operating room, which I typically don't answer, but I saw it was my brother, and I hung up, and he called me back again. I was like, "Well, I better answer this. I might be wrong." So I answered it, and he just sounded a little different. And he's like, "Hey, Eric, I'm really struggling with depression, and I've been reading about ketamine for depression, and I think I'm going to give this a try." And I said, "What are you talking about, ketamine?" I said, "I'm so sorry. Obviously, you're struggling with depression." "But ketamine for depression?" I said, "I've never even heard of that. I use it every day." And he's like, "Yeah, I'm thinking about maybe doing." I said, "Well, don't do anything until you let me look at the studies. Let me look at the research. Let me see what you're talking about before you jump into that." And they
It was
might
a
be,
decade or
I
so
said, "Are you
ago.
sure it's called ketamine? Because are you sure that's what you're talking about?"
Yeah.
And, and that was me after 25 years of using this medicine. And I guess I just was embarrassed to not even know that that was going on. There was some incredible research going on with mainly Yale University. So that's where that took my path from where I was going, functioning, doing open heart surgeries, the chairman of the Department of Anesthesia here in St. George, doing brain surgery. I helped open the hospital's OB anesthesia division and going down that road. And then the more I started studying this ketamine issue, the more I was just blown away with it by some of the studies and some of the research that I was reading. And a lot of it was done at Yale University, which is no slouch of a university. We've got an Ivy League school there doing really interesting studies on ketamine for treatment-resistant depression and how it works in the brain. So that's what kind of, to answer your question, that's a long answer to your question, but that's what kind of diverted my path to look more into this. And the more I looked into it, the more I thought, what an amazing additional service to bring to Southern Utah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So it sounds like, I mean, that's a moment your brother calls you and you're like, wait a minute, I've been in this world forever.
Yeah.
And then if I dive into that, the doing a little bit of research and there's a chance it could help, like it's something that's worth pursuing and seeing what it is. Okay.
Yeah.
I love that. For someone hearing about this ketamine for the first time, can you kind of explain exactly, what it is in kind of simple terms so they understand?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to get into something that someone needs to go to medical school to understand.
Yeah.
But ketamine is not. Let's talk about it on a more functional basis. Ketamine is a dissociative anesthetic.
Mhm.
Technically, we call it an NMDA receptor antagonist. And what that means in the brain is we have these NMDA receptors that are really critical in a lot of the things that our brain does.
Mhm.
And when I give patients ketamine, it kind of blocks that receptor in the brain. There is no other medicine that acts like ketamine. So if you think about like narcotics are in a family of drugs. So you have Lortab and morphine and Demerol and all these drugs that fall under that particular category.
Okay.
And here's ketamine over here all by itself. There's really no other family that's in that particular realm. So when we give patients ketamine, those receptors being blocked do some very interesting things in the brain. What happens is our processing center that's here in our prefrontal cortex of our brain, all of those inputs coming into it start to get distorted and blocked and altered.
Mhm.
And our processing center thinks it knows everything. I'm 58 years old and it thinks it knows what it's like to be Eric. It's been processing all of my information for 58 years and how this nerve is connected to this and how
Yeah.
I relate to the world and the universe around me. And when those inputs start coming into that processing center in an altered way, that processing center starts to be a little confused and get for lack of a better word, kind of a psychedelic experience starts to happen to you. We start to be slightly dissociated from our surroundings and our normal thought processes. Ketamine is it's extremely safe when we give it to patients. When I give it like I give it, I don't know of any other medicine that I can think of that in the 5 years I've been giving ketamine for mental health issues, I don't know of any other medicine that I can think of that I can look back and say, there's not one patient that I wish I wouldn't have given ketamine to. That's a pretty amazing statement to say about
That
a
is,
drug.
for sure.
It's incredible. Its efficacy and safety profile for me are just beautiful. But how ketamine works in the brain, let's discuss it not from necessarily a neurobiology standpoint. Let's discuss it more from a functional standpoint. Why would having a dissociative experience help you with anxiety and help you with depression and help
Mhm.
you with PTSD and that kind of thing? And by the way, it's also really helpful for chronic pain, which hopefully we can get into as well.
Love to, yeah.
But why would that happen? And there's other studies going on with psilocybins that are in magic mushrooms.
Mhm.
Maybe people that are watching this podcast have seen the Aaron Rodgers Netflix documentary of him traveling down to South America and doing ayahuasca. Well, why would that kind of dissociative state of our brain or inducing that kind of dissociative state in our brain make a difference for us with our mood and our brain function? And that's the $1 million question.
Right.
What what I think is happening in our brains when we have that process happen is, uh, I'll just put it in more simplistic terms. If our processing center is saying, well, wait a minute, I thought that nerve did this and I thought that nerve did that. And now it's coming through in a distorted way. And that you induce that multiple times in a row,
Mhm.
2 times this week, 2 times next week, 2 times the third week. And that's what the study at Yale did. Two psychiatrists there did that exact study, 6 infusions over a 3-week time period.
Mhm.
That processing center starts to think, maybe I don't know everything. Maybe I need to rethink things. Maybe I need to be more adaptable, more moldable, more the term we use in uh, brain science is neuroplasticity. Well, what is neuroplasticity of the brain? Neuroplasticity of the brain is if I take a 6-year-old and I just put them in a Chinese immersion classroom, well, they'll just pick up Chinese. Where at 58 years old, I can sit there for a year and I would be like, I don't know what the crap they're saying up there.
Okay.
I was in China for 6 weeks and I couldn't even hear some of the sounds that they were trying to teach me because my linguistic center has already solidified. And it's like, well, this is unimportant. I don't need those sounds. I don't need to hear
Mhm.
those things. So that is such a critical thing. I call that mechanism number one of ketamine is increasing the neuroplasticity of our brain. And that is so critical for people that the word that people use constantly when they come in to see me for the first time is I feel stuck. I feel stuck. I just can't get outside. I can't. fix this. I'm in this rut. I just feel mentally stuck.
To make sure that I understand it correctly, you're saying like when we're younger, sometimes the brain's it's a sponge, right? It's soaking up more information that's around. But then as we age, it becomes more of like maybe a brick. It's starting to resist the things that are coming around, and it can't quite accept it at much
Absolutely.
right pace.
And we notice that in people around us. The
Yeah.
older you get, the less likely you are to adapt easily, the less likely you are. The old sayings are always awesome. You can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that comes from somewhere. That kind of euphemism comes from somewhere. And that's what this is about, is as we age, our brain becomes more, um, less resilient, less adaptable, less moldable. And when that's happening, if we're struggling with something and we're really trying to find the solution to it, well, we're not as adaptable, we're not as moldable, we're not as, even having therapy, we might have gone through therapy for a couple of years and I can't mold my brain like they're trying to do. I can't think the way they're trying to help me think. Ketamine's amazing at making that neuroplasticity better and making us more moldable and more adaptable. And so I think that's kind of process number one when I'm thinking about ketamine, is increasing the neuroplasticity of the brain.
Wow.
Um, Process number two, interestingly, goes along with process number one, which is in the areas of our brain that deal with mood and emotion, the amygdala of our brain, the limbic system of our brain. Those areas of the brain are so critical for our emotional state. And when we start giving patients ketamine, those areas of the brain start sending out signals more organically of contentedness, peacefulness, joyfulness, motivation. And at the same time, here's this processing center over here that's more neuroplastic and is like, maybe I could feel like that all the
Mm-hmm.
time. Maybe I will let that in. It's not like, well, I'm Eric and I've got depression. I might feel okay right now, but I know the other shoe's going to drop in about an hour and I'm going to be back down in my processing center might be more open and more agreeable to those new emotions that are coming out on a more frequent basis. So that's different than, say, the traditional approach that we've done since the 1950s, which is, well, let's just change your brain chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't feel good, let's boost your more excitatory chemicals in your brain like serotonin or dopamine or norepinephrine. And you have to take those pills every day in order to get your brain chemistry to shift over. And it doesn't do it just in the areas of the brain that we want it to. It does it everywhere in the central nervous system. Well, gosh, side effects then, if we're going to shift people's brain chemistry over, side effects become a big deal. So that mechanism number two with ketamine of shifting those emotional centers of the brain to send out more positive signals is being done in a way that isn't having to take something every day and isn't having to shift your brain chemistry, and you're not getting the side effect profile. And that's just a game changer for people. And then mechanism number three, the last one I'll talk about, unless you want to talk about more. The mechanism number three is so unique to ketamine. There's no other drug that does this in the brain. One of the things that when we block that NMDA receptor in the brain that takes over is another receptor system that gets accelerated. And that receptor system releases something called BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor.
Okay.
I know I'm getting a little bit into the weeds here, but that
No, you're good.
particular factor, when you have that factor boosted up and elevated to a more normal level, that factor um, causes the nerves between our emotional centers of our brain and our processing center of our brain to be more connected. At the ends of those nerves, you'll see what we call dendritic branching, where the branches of the nerve start to branch like the branches of a tree.
Okay.
It's an actual change in the wiring happening in our brain when we give patients ketamine. Ketamine turns out to be an amazing booster of that particular factor in the brain, and that's completely new for us in mental health medicine. That's not something we've been dealing with or thinking about. So when we give patients ketamine and that BDNF gets raised in the blood, that factor gets raised in our brains get, the way I think about that is, instead of my emotional center running my consciousness because there's lack of communication and regulation, my processing center can be a better regulator or gatekeeper of the emotions, that it allows those emotional centers to even send out or come to the surface. So my processing center may reject feelings of despair. Hey, send me a different emotion. I don't need that emotion right now. This shouldn't be a despair situation. Or really importantly is anxiety, and the bear's chasing me, the tiger's chasing me, but I'm looking around. Where is it? I don't understand. Where's this sense of dis-ease coming from? It's coming from that runaway emotional center that's sending those signals to our processing center, and our processing center is not communicating back. I'm not even going to let that come to the conscious level. Send me something else. And ketamine is really good at all three of those mechanisms. And luckily, it happens really quickly. Some patients feel that change right after their first infusion. But for most patients, it's kind of infusion 3 and 4 where the magic tends to happen for them and where they really feel that shift taking place inside of them. Um, and that's just so different than what we've been doing since the 1950s for all of this.
So it seems like it kind of helps, like the brain can become hardwired over time, but it can be wired incorrectly. And it kind of helps it be open to it. And what I'm thinking about is just, for example, as a kid, I was probably 4 or 5 years old and I went to jump on the counter, right? To get on the counter to get into the cupboards there. And I had to put my hand on the stove, not realizing that it was red hot. And
Yeah.
it was just, I didn't know that. And then that pain hardwires the brain as like, okay, stay away from the stove. And I think about that because I think when we experience trauma, I think the brain can perceive it the same way. Here's this pain, and we stay away from anything that's like this. And if there's anything that even brings it up, we stay away from it because the brain's now hardwired to stay away from that. But then it seems like it could get hardwired incorrectly that way.
Well, I love that you brought up that hot stove because I use that with my patients all the time, Christian. That's so
Yeah.
funny that you brought that up because I'll say, well,
How I learned the stove's red.
yeah, there's certain things that our brain learns that are so useful for us. Don't touch that stove because it's hot. That's
Yeah.
really useful. But our brain will lie to us all the time. And that's such a critical component. It's not just come get some ketamine. When ketamine has started to make your brain more adaptable and more open, we have to replace the thinking patterns with better thinking patterns. If we're going to kind of update the software, if you will, in our brain, we've got to update it with something better, a better pathway, better thought process, better psychology, honestly. And so integration around ketamine is really key. And I think that's why our clinic wins, Best of Southern Utah for like 5 years in a row, because I think we focus on a lot of things besides just integration. It's not, ketamine isn't a magic bullet. And I want to get that off really early in this thing because ketamine does some amazing things for the brain, but it's a tool in a toolbox. So hormonal balance, psychological balance, there's so many other components that ketamine puts fertile ground. I guess that would be the metaphor I would use is you've got this fertile ground, but in order for that seed to grow, there's other components that are needed, sunshine, um, water, that kind of thing. And so ketamine is amazing in that way, but it needs other components, if that makes sense.
Is that like what you're saying there is if you have ketamine and it makes the brain a little bit more as a sponge, so to speak, we got to make sure that we're feeding it the right things.
Right. You don't want to put vinegar in a sponge.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not going to.
So it doesn't solve it itself. It just makes the brain a little more willing to accept new data.
Great way to put it.
Okay.
If we're talking about our brains are wired for problem solving, not happiness. Our brains are an incredible problem solving machine, the biggest problem solving machine on the planet. AI is trying to replicate what our brains do. That's what these developers are. How does our brain problem solve, and how does it have consciousness, and how does it? Data is one thing, and AI is amazing at assimilating data and getting data out there. But how does our brain do what it does? It's an incredible problem solver, but it's not necessarily wired to make us happy and joyful and peaceful.
It's designed to keep us alive.
It's designed for safety, and it's designed to don't touch that stove. And is there any other thing that I need to be worried about? If our ancestors way back when were just oblivious to any of the dangers and struggles around them, well, you just didn't survive. And so our brains having that adaptation and that ability are so critical for the survival of the human race.
Yeah.
But in 2025, which we're doing this podcast in, having that sympathetic, fear-based system being so ramped up can be really detrimental to us and can really be harmful to us. So I'll tell my patients an analogy might be the Department of Defense. You've got this huge computer system that's an incredible system. And then here comes this hacker that'll hack into that computer system and put in there an algorithm that's almost impossible to solve, if not impossible to solve. And that computer system will put more and more and more processing power toward it until it's just overwhelmed. And then here comes this person coming along just trying to spit out some paychecks, and it says, sorry, too busy to do that. That's us. When we get so caught up in what I hope we can talk about is what I call the gap, and our brain is so busy trying to solve all that gap's problem. It's like that computer system that just can't have enough bandwidth or enough processing power just to enjoy our day,
Mhm.
just to enjoy the beauty of it's a Saturday and I can't even enjoy it. Why? Because my brain's so busy trying to process everything to up to this 58 years. How the heck did I get here?
Yeah.
And why did I do that? And why did she do that? And oh my gosh. Or where am I going? If our brain is so overwhelmed with all of that and um, we haven't tamed it and that problem solving ability. And that's what I think ketamine is so amazing for, is releasing some of that processing power to bring it back to being present, back to just being today and just being,
Yeah.
for lack of a better word.
An analogy that I heard a while ago that just kind of really stuck with me, that's along those lines. And I think I was at an event and there was a speaker, and they said, imagine that you are in this beautiful meadow. There's trees all over the place. There's pine trees, there's flowers. It's sunny. The smell is amazing. All of that is going well, right? And then there's this predator that shows up in the corner. Your brain will ignore all of the other stuff that's absolutely amazing and will focus on the predator. And it's because you need to stay alive. And the flowers don't hurt you, and the smells don't hurt you, and the sunshine doesn't hurt you. Maybe over time, but
Right.
sunshine doesn't hurt you, but that predator does. So your brain is designed to zone in on that predator. The problem is now that predator doesn't exist, but the brain's still wired that way, to focus on that one thing, even though everything else is amazing, beautiful, smells well, all of that. But it's like, we're going to zone in and focus on this because this is the perceived threat to life, even though it's not at the moment today, right? But it feels that way.
I agree completely. Focus is such a clear thing that we work on in our clinic. If your brain works like you have a great brain, Christian. I mean, you process things quickly, you're articulate, you have an amazing brain. If your brain works like most amazing brains, when you're coming through my clinic, if you come to my clinic, where what people feel like is, well, how the heck am I supposed to feel peaceful? How am I supposed to feel okay? Well, look at everything I got to deal with over here.
Yeah.
And I typically spend at least an hour with their patients listening to them about everything that their brain is focused on.
Yeah.
What they're focusing on is so critical to me to understand, because if I don't know what they're focused on, I don't know how to change their focus.
Mm.
And it's typically what their brain has decided to focus on that has caused them, in my opinion, to have depression and anxiety and trauma and all of these things. So you're exactly right when you talk about focus. If your brain thinks that we'll all be happy when I solve these problems, you're never going to be happy. I don't care what SSRI some psychiatrists put you on. I don't care how many times you go to therapy. I don't care if you can't get balance where
Mhm.
I feel like peacefulness comes from, where that Zen comes from, where people thrive in their life, is not when I solve all these problems, then I'll be okay. But that's what our brain wants to say.
Yeah,
Our
for
brain
sure.
is wired to solve problems. So why wouldn't it think that our problems are where happiness lies? If you think, and your brain does think this, by the way, if you think that happiness and peaceful lies on the other side of our problems, you're never going to get to that
Mhm.
location. Never.
That's huge.
So balance is where we find peacefulness. Balance, not in solving everything, it's in readjusting our calibration and in the balance of things. Our brain is an amazing engine. Um, and those listening, if you don't think that your brain is different than something else, go ahead and think that way. I choose with my free agency to believe that my brain is separate from my consciousness.
Mhm.
And it just helps me feel better. And so my consciousness needs to be the rudder for this powerful problem solving engine. It needs to be the rudder behind that. If it's not, my engine will go over here and
I
solve
love that
these
analogy.
problems all day long. But if I can't rein it in, if I can't be the rudder for that amazing, powerful engine, then of course it's going to go to do what it's designed to do. It's my consciousness, it's my higher order functions that I have to develop in order to control this powerful engine, to also focus on the other things in my life? Why would I need to focus on things that are okay? Well, if I focus on those, then I'm not focusing on the problems I got to solve. But
Mm.
it's the things that are okay that our brain's not so worried about. That's the flowers in your analogy. That's the beautiful sky. It's over here focused on the tiger. Well, the tiger doesn't make us happy. The tiger doesn't make us enjoy our lives. It doesn't let us have a picnic and enjoy the blanket and the sunshine on our face and our beautiful partner that might be lying next to us.
Yeah.
But that's how our brains are designed, and so we've got to, and modern life is that on steroids, it seems like,
And
man.
we just think we just need to kill the tiger and then we go back to this bliss. But the problem
Correct.
is
And
another one shows up.
that's a huge part of when people's brains are adaptable, more moldable, more neuroplastic. That's a huge part of my focus, is trying to get them to understand something that I call the gap. And the gap is so critical to, in my opinion, mental health.
Mhm.
And um, and I know we're getting away from ketamine a little bit, but this is such a big piece of it. The gap is, here's how I want things to be. Here's how I want my marriage to be. Here's how I want my sex life to be. Here's how I want my career to be. Here's how I want my finances to be. Oh my gosh, I want that Mercedes, or I want this, or I want that. This is the kind of man I want to be, or woman that I want to be. And here's the man that I am. And that gap creates such a sense of dis-ease inside of our brain, because, man, is that an amazing problem to solve?
Yeah.
Here's where you want to be, and here's where I am. Good, man, I've got problems and problems and problems. I'm going to focus on that, like that supercomputer at the Department of Defense. And the more we focus on that gap, the more we try to solve all those problems, the more dis-ease we start to feel. Because I don't know about you, Christian, but man, when I solve something that's really hard over here, the universe says, I'll call it, since I don't know what anybody else believes, but the universe puts another thing over there and another
Yeah.
thing over there and another thing over there. And that gap is always going to be present. I have it. Man, I want to be a better doctor. I want to be a better husband. I want to be a better father, dog owner, horseman, all the things that I love to do.
Mhm.
But here's the man that I am. And the difference between maybe me sitting in this chair and my patient sitting over there who's having incredible anxiety and depression and struggle and trauma is that gap has become so wide for them and so insurmountable that it feels like Mount Everest to them. Every day feels like Mount Everest. It's just too much.
It seems like when people have experienced trauma or whatever, it can become so hardwired to focus on the tiger, and that maybe ketamine just helps to disrupt that a little bit.
Absolutely. I think that's really key. This gap that I try to help patients with, like I said, I have that as well. It's just that the difference between me and my patients is that I understand its role. And in fact, understand its critical necessity in my life. People will use the terms, I'll ask them after they've gone through a whole diatribe of things. My husband just cheated on me. My wife just cheated on me. My daughter is using my kids against me, or her kids against me, and my grandkids against me, or whatever. They're all of these really tough things that people are struggling with. And I'll ask them, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Mm.
And immediately, it's a bad thing. It's horrible. I don't know if I'm going to make it through this, whatever it may be that they're struggling with.
Well,
And one of the stories that I really love to tell them in these situations, when here's how I want things to be and here's how they are. And man, that gap, because of whatever trauma or event is happening for them personally right now, or even as a child. I have a
mm,
lot of patients that come through with sexual abuse and emotional abuse and physical abuse. And man, does that widen the gap between how, as a child, they wanted things to be and how they are, and really skews the how big the tiger is compared
yeah,
to,
to really hardwire that the wrong way and make
yeah.
it exaggerate it.
Our brain wants to fill things in the way it's designed, and our synapses are designed, and our processing center is designed, as we don't like ambiguity. We want to know things. We don't want to have ambiguity. Living in limbo is incredibly painful for people. Is my wife going to leave me, or isn't she? Oh my gosh, am I going to get better, or aren't I? Or is this cancer going to take my life, or isn't it? Living in limbo is painful because our brain can't solve the problem. That's in the future, and how is our brain supposed to figure that out until we get there? It can't. If you've ever looked at those paragraphs that the words are missing in your brain, you sit there and look at it, and then pretty soon your brain just fills it all in, and all of a sudden you can read it. That's our brain saying, I don't like that. I don't like
Mhm.
that, get those
Love that
gaps.
analogy.
So one of the things when I was in China that my guide was telling me there was talking about a story during Mao's time, um, and everybody was quite poor. Millions of people were dying of starvation, and in on this old farmer's farm walks this horse. Nobody else in the village has a horse, and he's just shocked. Oh my gosh, there's a horse. He doesn't want to get in trouble, so he puts out the word about this horse. Hey, this horse is here. I'm taking care of it, but just so you're aware, I know it's not mine. But he starts putting it to work, and he can't believe how much more productive he is. And if you know the Asian culture, man, luck is a big part of things. Good luck, bad luck. And why do our brains want to know if something's good or bad for us? Because if I don't know if that thing over there is good or bad for me, I don't know whether to move toward it or move away from it. And we have to know those things. Otherwise, we're just lost, right? Don't touch the stove. You have to know whether something's good or bad for you. But our brains will leap to conclusions that can be completely wrong. So in the story, our brain will say, it'll fill in that gap in a way that you mentioned earlier, that you said, well, it can be distorted, or it can be dysfunctional, or it can be wrong. And trauma is so critical at that particular thing. And so is a lot of other things that happen to us. In the story, they all go over to the wise Chinese guru's house, and they're telling the wise Chinese man, look at this farmer, how lucky he is. Isn't this blessed? And the wise Chinese man says, we'll see. And they all walk away. What do you mean, we'll see? He's got a horse. We don't have horses. And so they walk away. And a little while later, the farmer's son's working on that horse, and there's an accident that rolls over on the farmer's son's legs, crushes his legs. He's in a really bad way. Back to the wise Chinese guru's home they go. You're right. We should have waited to see it. That horse was bad luck. It was a bad thing. Look at his son. And the wise Chinese man says, no, we'll see. And so they all walk away. What do you mean we'll see? His son's really hurt. He might not even ever walk again. Here comes Mao's army through and picks up all the young men in the village and takes them off to a useless war and a useless campaign. And all the young men in the village get killed, wiped out. All the family goes over to the wise Chinese man's home and says, man, you're right. We should have waited to see him at getting that horse and his son crushing his legs. His son's still there. Wow. He didn't get taken. All our sons are dead, and he's recovering. What an amazing blessing that was. We didn't even see that from clear back there coming. Did you see that? That's amazing, the blessing. And the wise Chinese man says, we'll see. And it keeps going on and on. The point of that story is our brain wants to tell us that things are good or bad immediately, without the perspective, without the time, without the wisdom to understand whether something is good for us or bad for us. There's been things that have happened to me in my life, Christian, that I look back and say, man, I don't think I was ever going to make it through that. Yeah. And if you would have walked up to me and said, you're going to be grateful for this someday, I would have just wanted to punch you in the throat. Yeah. But sitting here now, I can look back at some of those things that I really didn't think I was going to make it through. And I am grateful for them because they were the very purchase price of some higher order functions that I need as a human being. And even as a younger man, when I was more atheistic and maybe agnostic as far as spiritually, I still wanted these things. I wanted to understand patience. I wanted to understand empathy. I wanted to understand forgiveness, unconditional love, those higher order functions that movies are made and books are written about and poems, and everything is about those items. Well, as a more spiritual person, which is one of the reasons I opened this clinic, was because I had a big shift in myself about 5 years ago. And I think a lot of people coming through my clinic are also kind of spiritually sick too. And now as a more spiritual person, I want those same things. I just want them for a little bit different reason. But how do you purchase those things, Christian? Yeah. How do you purchase empathy, patience, forgiveness, unconditional love? The very purchase price of those things is what we're talking about. Is your husband cheating on you a good thing or a bad thing, or your wife cheating you on a good thing or a bad thing? It's horrible. Can you think of anything good? No, nope, not at all. With the perspective of time and as you go by in your life, looking back, what might you have gained? Do you ever watch boxing, Christian? Is that something you've ever done? Or
A little
MMA
bit.
or any of that
I've
stuff?
watched it.
Sometimes I'll watch boxing and I'll look at the boxer, and the boxer doesn't think he's won at the end of the match. His shoulders are slumped. He's looking down at the mat. And you can tell by his body language, or at least I can, because body language is a huge thing in my business. So I'll look at his body language, like, he doesn't think he's won. And then the ref will lift his glove up, and then the ego comes out. Of course I won. He starts dancing around, and well, as you go to the judges have him for every round in that fight. Why doesn't he think he's won at the end of the fight? Because when you're busy getting hit in the face, you don't know whether you're winning or losing. You're just trying to survive. And people coming through and sitting in my chair in my clinic, when they're telling me everything, they're in the fight of their lives. They've been getting punched for I don't know how long with whatever it is that they've been handling. And when I'll ask them, "Are you losing?" They'll, almost to a person, they'll say, "Yeah, I'm losing." And I'll say, "Are you sure? What metric are you using to gauge that?" And I'll tell them that boxing analogy, and I'll say, "Is it possible you're winning?" And they'll say, "Well, what the hell am I winning? Do you just listen? Are you listening to me?" And I'll say, "Yeah, I'm listening to you. What is it that you might be winning that with perspective and time that it might change what your perspective?" And we'll talk about patience. We'll talk about empathy, and we'll talk about forgiveness, which I think is one of the most critical things not to suffer from depression and anxiety, is the idea of forgiveness and resonating with forgiveness. And these don't have to be you don't have to be a spiritual person to agree that man, forgiveness is just part of the human condition. We better have that. If we don't have that, we're in big trouble.
I love that analogy that you've given with boxing, because I think, if day in and day out you were just getting punched in the face all day long, you have no idea if you're winning, and the brain is just like, we must be losing, because otherwise we wouldn't be getting punched in the face at all.
You're not the person to keep score at that point. You're not the person to be keeping score. You're busy getting hit. It's the judges sitting around there that probably have a better view of what's going on and how many times you also hit back. How hard did that hurt that guy? Well, you don't know. So this idea is so critical. And I know we're getting off the topic of ketamine, but it's really not. Ketamine helps me get these concepts into somebody's brain of, you may not be losing.
Seems like you're using them together.
Correct.
You're using ketamine to kind of make the brain a little more like a sponge, and we're using the other side to
This is that replacement. This is that software that needs to be present to feel peaceful, to feel comfortable. I mean, I've got CEOs flying in here to talk to me to get ketamine for this reason. I've got incredibly professional people, and from the outside, if you were sitting there looking at them, you'd say, they've got it all together. And then they sit in my clinic and tell me about their gap and about how they struggle with their gap and how anxiety-ridden they were just yesterday, or how suicidal they are. And yet they've got material wealth. And from the outside, you think, my gosh, these people are doing amazing. Steve Jobs with Apple, horrible home life and mental life, and yet one of the most successful, if you use that metric of creativity and financial success, one of the most successful people on the planet when he was alive. But is that the metric that is the be all and end all? Or is it peacefulness? Is it joyfulness? Is it happiness? Why are we here? That existential question is such a big one that our brains are wrestling with. It is so hard to understand. And if I can get my patients, I'm not trying to convert them over to a religion. I'm trying to get them over to a faith choice, if that makes sense. I don't think you can have peacefulness without faith. And I'm not talking about faith when it comes to a religious or spiritual nature, although it can cross over into that. I've got patients coming in saying, I can't drive in St. George. We're here in St. George. They're like, this place has turned into a mess. And I grew up here when there was one stoplight in town. And so I understand that. You're going out trying to go over to Costco, and it's like, my gosh. The reason that they can't drive and that they're having panic attacks as they start their car up, and that they're having to hold their chest, and is because they have no faith in their fellow man. As you're going through that green light, you have to have faith that the drivers coming this way aren't going to run the red lights and just T-bone you. And they don't have any faith in their own driving. So it doesn't have to necessarily be a religious faith to be able to function okay. But your brain having faith that things are okay and as they should be is so critical for homeostasis and for you to feel okay, if that makes sense.
For sure. Do you think what makes the difference between ketamine and kind of more of some of the other traditional approaches to depression is your kind of traditional approaches is just like, let's silence the brain right now. whereas ketamine is what's liven the brain up a little bit and maybe give it some different data to maybe help with long-term
I
effects.
think that's a great way to put it. Human beings, because we're problem solvers, how do we solve this problem that I've been talking about? Some people decide I'm going to reach out for something to numb myself. I'll reach out to alcohol. And my gosh, that's the grease that's used all over the world to kind of help with our gap. You and I are going to go out to dinner. It's like, well, maybe I'll have a cocktail or something because it'll be the social grease to just let me relax so that I don't care so much about whether I say something stupid or whether I look stupid or whatever. Uh, relieve my anxiety. Some people will reach out for cannabis. Some people will reach out for an SSRI to change their brain chemistry, like you're talking about. Well, all of those things are trying to do such a different approach than ketamine. Ketamine is opening your brain. I liken it to, here's my path that I'm on and my blinders. I'm like a horse in New York that has these blinders so I don't see all the cabs and get freaked out and everything. Well, that's great for that horse in New York that's pulling the Hansom cab. It's not so great for me as a human being that I've got these blinders on that don't open up any other ideas, any other path to me. I only know what it's like to be me and my history. And when we give patients ketamine, I find that their perspective starts to become more of a 30,000 foot view, more of a 60,000 foot view, instead of
Wow.
every little thing that they're stressed about and worried about, that's the minutia of their day, becomes a bigger view, if that makes sense.
For sure.
Um, yeah.
Walk me through what someone can expect. So if, from the first consultation to the first infusion, like what happens during that time?
First consultation in our clinic, I know there's clinics in town that people just walk in and they throw them in a room and squirt ketamine up their nose or give them a shot in their arm, or they, get them going on their ketamine. First thing in my clinic, I want to use a holistic approach to patients. As I said, I view ketamine as a doctor as a tool, not the magic answer. So I want to find out, is there any other thing that I could put in the recipe that would make this thing taste good? So I try to find, are there other issues that I need to address? Hormonal balance. We talked about balance, and that's a huge deal. I can't believe how many people are coming through my clinic now with hormonal issues. So we'll talk about what age group they're at, what their hormones might be doing, and focus on that. Our food and our chemical exposure has, even younger men are coming in with very low testosterone levels now, and Hashimoto's thyroiditis. I diagnose that all the time, and people have been going to their family practice doctor for years. And I just don't feel good, and I'll diagnose Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is kind of that autoimmune thing related to our diet that's attacking our thyroid gland and making us hypothyroid. So for me, the first visit is about an hour plus long. Sometimes my nurses get mad at me because I'll be in there for 2 hours. I'm like, this is a complex situation. So we just spend the time that we need to spend. And so I'll look at their hormonal issues and make sure that I'm not missing something there. Sleep apnea, which is another big deal that can exacerbate anxiety, depression, and those kind of things. And then I really want them to tell me about, of course, them. And it's hard for someone to tell you their life story in 5 minutes, like corporate medicine wants them to do. VC companies and corporate medicine have bought out almost every medical practice around. And the metric in that EMR, that electronic medical record, is 15-minute visits, man. You got to hit that peg. My gosh, I had a woman come in the other day that went and saw our OBGYN doctor here in town. And she said, I walked in the office at 4:15 and I was home by 4:30. And she says, I feel horrible. That's why she ended up coming to see us to see if we could do something.
Wow.
So you can't do it. You cannot do it in a 15-minute visit or a 10-minute visit. So we spend the time necessary. I look over their issues, I hear what their problems are, and then I try to get their brain prepped for this really cool chemical that I'm about to give them. And I try to bring to the forefront of their brain some things that are down there in their Rolodex. It's just that their brain has kind of forgotten about it. And then
these are kind of the more positive things that they have. Maybe they've suppressed some of those, and you're trying to bring those.
Yeah, I think that I'll give you a really good example is if I asked how your brain works. If I asked you, think of two big cities, get them in your brain. You got them? Now, consciously choose between one of those and tell me which one did you choose.
I got it? We got it.
Which one are you going to tell me?
Salt Lake City.
Salt Lake City. That's a big city. What's the one you didn't choose?
Los Angeles.
Okay, well, that's a big city as well. Have you heard of Mexico City? It has 20, 30 million people. Have you heard of Paris, Istanbul? Have you heard of Beijing, China?
Mm-hmm.
Those are all down there in your Rolodex, and you're like, yep, yep, yep. But why, when I said quick, give me the city, that's our brain saying, quick, what's my emotion? And what's popping up is despair, it's hopelessness. Why? They know joy. They know what it feels like to be happy. They've been happy before in their life. They know what it feels like to be peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why isn't that just popping up when their processing center is quick emotional center? What am I feeling? Just like those things are down in there. But so in that first visit, I'm trying to remind them of Istanbul and Mexico City and those things and have them more on the forefront of their mind because sometimes people haven't thought about some of those thoughts for quite a while. That's why they're so depressed. They know what I'm trying to say. And as I'm going through some of these things, they'll be like, oh yeah, okay. I'm putting a different perspective on all the things that they
Yeah.
just told me so that I go give them this cool chemical that's opening their brain and making them more adaptable and moldable. And that gets deeper down into the psyche of some of those things that we just talked about. So it's kind of complex to kind of tell you how I do that first hour. And then we do the infusion. And some ketamine clinics will try to do therapy while you're on ketamine. I find that's really not that helpful. And there may be other doctors out there, ketamine providers that disagree with me. But if I get the level of dissociation of your brain right, you don't want to sit there and have a conversation with me. It's like having a beautiful dream and your wife taps you on the shoulder and because you're snoring or something, and you're like, oh, I want to go back to that dream. Why? Why did you wake me up? And you close your eyes and you try to get back to the dream. Well, someone like, how are you doing? And blah, blah. It's like your brain is doing all these really complex things while you're having ketamine. And I don't want to disrupt that.
Mm.
Your brain is amazing problem solver. And I just want to give you the tool and let that happen. And I find that pre and post ketamine is the best time to kind of help nudge people's brains in a better direction with that kind of conversation. I try to have patients' brains get in the right state during that 40-minute infusion. And that's what it is a 40-minute infusion of ketamine and then talk to them before and after. So during your ketamine treatment, I think you did ask me kind of, well, what's that like?
Yeah.
What is it like for a ketamine treatment?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, if this is sober and this is that I'm hallucinating and I'm a dolphin for 45 minutes, I don't need you over here for that to work. Although I have had patients that are like, man, you turned on that underwater scene and I was communicating with those dolphins for 45 minutes. Well, great. If you're not anxiety ridden about that and those dolphins are downloading a beautiful information into your brain, great. But I don't need you over there out on Mars or having an out of body experience in order for this to really be effective for you. In that original Yale study, they used a dose of ketamine and based on your body weight. It was a half a milligram of ketamine per kilogram of body weight. And they did that for all 6 infusions. And they didn't really pay attention to, well, how dissociated are they, or high, for lack of a better word, are they? And they still got a 70% success rate in that study. Our clinic has a little higher success rate than that. Most of my patients, depending on what I'm treating, they're more of an 85% success rate if I kind of went across the board with it. And
How
that's
does that
because,
compare to traditional
well, if you take,
depression medication?
well, in that Yale study, the cohort of patients that they used in that study was what they termed treatment resistant depression patients. So these are patients that had already failed therapy and SSRIs and ECTs.
So meaning 0% success rate.
Well, they
with
had
those.
really struggled.
Okay,
And so
right.
to find anything that works on a group of patients like that, you're probably feeling pretty lucky if you can find something that's 20% effective for them.
Okay, that makes sense.
And in that study, they got almost a 70% success rate, which just shocked them and kind
Wow.
of shocked me too, which
Yeah.
is why I moved down this road. If you're looking at just traditional, hey, I've got depression, I need some help. And the most common thing that people get put on is Prozac. Well, Prozac, the efficacy that most people tout on Prozac is somewhere around the order of 35 to 55%, depending on what you're treating. But then again, you've got all these side effect profiles of sexual dysfunction and weight gain. And yeah, you took away my lows, but you also took away my highs. And I just don't feel dynamic anymore in my life. And kind of like
Just
I'm a
rules
robot.
everything.
Yeah, I feel kind of like I'm a robot going through the motions. So ketamine doesn't do that. Um, so so ketamine, what I'm shooting for when I give the infusion is that people are just very, very relaxed. I do an IV every time. I could make a lot more money using the Spravato or the S-ketamine or other forms of ketamine, but I don't find it to be the best practice. IV ketamine, pure ketamine.
What are those, just for those who
Oh, yeah, sure.
are the differences?
So there was a drug company that was looking at these studies and looking at all these ketamine clinics popping up across the country. And the drug company, I mean, I didn't think of this as a younger man, but believe it or not, drug companies want to make money. And
Clear.
so, yeah, so they'll even put that ahead of patients, believe it
Mm,
or not. So they took pure ketamine in its pure form and they split it into its two parts. Most chemical mixtures are like your hands; they have mirror images that are together. And when you split that into the two parts, one was called S-ketamine and one's called R-ketamine of the two chemical structures. Well, they patented the process of how to do that. They could have just taken pure ketamine and done studies on it, but that wasn't their goal. Their goal was how can we patent something and make money on it and
mm.
put it into a product. Ketamine's been around too long to patent something with it. It's like, that's not going to make any drug company any money. They're not excited about that.
So if we tweak it and protect it, we can charge more.
That is exactly right. I mean, they make billions of dollars on Prozac, Elavil, Zoloft, all of these medicines. They're not that excited about ketamine. And
Yeah.
sometimes that makes my life a little difficult, but hey, we play in the playground that we're thrown into. Um, so they did that. And so there's a nasal spray called S-ketamine. That's that S part that we talked about, that S mirror image. And they
Okay.
put it in a nasal spray and they did all the studies and got FDA approval for it. And so I can get patients through 4 infusions at my clinic for what 1 infusion of that stuff costs. And yet,
Mm.
but ketamine or insurance companies won't pay for the IV ketamine, they'll pay for that.
Fast.
So, because FDA approval hasn't been obtained yet with pure ketamine, who wants to pay the millions of dollars to do that study? Nobody.
Yeah, there's no
Nobody.
financial benefit for them to
No.
do it because there's nothing that you can protect.
So there's other clinics out there that do it that way, and then there's other clinics that will use pure ketamine, but they'll give you an IM injection of it. Um, all other methods, in my mind, are inferior to IV ketamine because IV ketamine is the pure ketamine molecule. Number one, it's not the nasal spray stuff. And I can titrate that really well. That's what I've been doing for 30 years is put them on a computerized pump, a protocol that allows me to titrate the dose and titrate their blood level. If you squirt something up your nose and you get that ketamine going into your system, you're on for whatever ride you're going to get. And sometimes it's a really horrible ride. And so when
Mm.
I have patients call me, I feel horrible when they, oh, doc, I was going to do ketamine, but I had a nightmarish experience with it. And I'll say, I'll bet you got it in as a shot or up your nose, didn't you? And they'll say, yep. And I'll say, well, that's too bad because that could have been life changing for you, but please come to my clinic and give it another try.
So you're able to monitor kind of what the levels are
Yeah,
to make sure we don't go
exactly.
too overboard.
Okay.
Do
And I
they
get
get put out or
Do they get put out?
yeah.
No, this is not like
They're-
general anesthesia whatsoever. It's you're protecting your own airway. You don't have to come in with an empty stomach like surgery, all those kind of things. We're causing a level of dissociation that feels like, man, I just feel really relaxed. What's that TV doing? There's no way Dr. Evans bought that TV at Costco. Oh my gosh, that's kind of crazy. The colors are amazing. I feel like I'm in that scene. What is happening here? This is amazing. And then they'll hear the music that we put on for them that's so conducive to good brainwaves, and they'll listen to that and they're like, "Is that timed with that video? What is happening with that?" My gosh, this music is super deep. And then all of a sudden,
the brain just becomes really open to
yeah,
surroundings.
and really beautiful. Typically, it's really most people look at ketamine as a get to, not a have to.
Okay.
And so those other forms can cause problems. I feel like I can titrate this to a level that makes people feel really good while they're in my clinic. That's wonderful, but that's not necessarily the be all and end all. I really want people to feel good in between their infusions.
Right.
So there's this loading phase that involves 6 of those types of treatments, 40 minutes of ketamine being delivered, and then about a 20 to 30-minute process of kind of recovering from that in the clinic before I let them go home. So there's kind of 4 to 6 infusions that to get people where I want them to be. And then people typically maintain that with just like once a month, once every 6 weeks, once every 2 months that they come back to my clinic in order to kind of maintain that altitude.
So over time, you're kind of doing a little more in the beginning, and then over time, kind of less and less.
Keeping that factor that we talked about earlier, that BDNF up for and elevated for a good 2 to 3 weeks is pretty critical for patients to get where I want them to be. And then to maintain that doesn't take as much. It's kind of like a jet that takes off, takes a lot to get up to that 30,000 foot level, but then they kind of turn back the engines and coast along at 600 miles an hour in that rarer atmosphere. And that's kind of how I view my patients.
Yeah. What's the most common emotions or reactions that people will have like during their first treatment?
I'm always amazed at how the brain seems to go where it needs to go.
Mm.
I've had patients on their first infusion that will tell me, "Oh my gosh, I felt like I was having a literal discussion with my dead father." It was just amazing. We were just conversing and it felt so peaceful. And I was able to tell him everything I wanted to tell him. I've had patients that are just feeling like I've never felt such peacefulness, just complete peacefulness. I've never felt that. And they kind of bring that back with them. I've had patients that are like, that was really rough. I was experiencing incredible sadness and incredible anger at something. But afterwards, they feel that relief that it's, and ketamine, because it's this dissociative thing, our brains tend to compartmentalize. Let's say, for example, that you were sexually abused as a child or something.
Mm.
You can compartmentalize that to protect yourself. And then under ketamine, a lot of times you'll be able to think about things, but think about them without as much emotional pain and emotional suffering, and put a better perspective on those. And then we'll talk about, well, what did you think about during your treatment? And we'll talk about that. And they'll say, I went to this place of just really sadness or struggle, but I needed to. I haven't been able to touch that for so long, you know? Um, so it just depends on the person. Um, and I never can predict it. And
Just a little different.
interestingly, the same person will have a different experience all 4 or 6 treatments during that loading phase. It's like and that's another very common thing people tell me is, every treatment's so different. I can't believe what just happened on that one. And most of the time it's like, that was my best treatment yet. And then they'll come in, that was my best treatment yet.
It's
And
like the brain's just taking that moment to kind of sort through a couple of
yeah,
things.
it's like this. I have horses. And so I'll go up and I'll work on my horses and their manes will get really tangled and their tail will get really tangled. And there's this stuff called detangler and you spray it on the horses. You can't get it out without it, honestly.
Yeah.
You'll work on it and you'll pull it pretty soon. You ended up cutting their thing and they look goofy. I'll spray this detangler on there and give it a few minutes. And all of a sudden it just kind of
Works
untangles. And
itself
it's like,
out.
God, I don't know what's in this stuff, but it's a dang amazing thing.
So ketamine's the
And
detangler.
ketamine's the detangler for people. I give it to people, and then all of a sudden, over the next 2 to 3 weeks, I see things starting to kind of detangle, and I think it's so similar to that. I've thought about that so many times when I'm up there brushing my horse, and it's like, this is just like ketamine. It just I don't understand how it works. I have an amazing chemistry and physician background, and I feel like I have a rudimentary understanding of how ketamine works. Like, I understand how that TV works right there, to a point. There's these light emitting diodes back there. There's all this stuff happening, and I could probably give you a reasonable explanation of it, but I really don't know how the dang thing works.
Hmm.
But I can sure enjoy it. I can put on the next
Right.
Netflix video and enjoy it, and that's kind of ketamine to me. I'm doing my best to understand how is this thing doing such an amazing job for people, but I think it's still an early thing. We've only known that ketamine was this good for this kind of thing for not that long.
For those patients that you've seen, I mean, you've had, you know, many by now. What does progress in the real world look like?
For me, at the end of that first hour visit, I'll ask patients, what would you consider this a success? If this happened,
Hmm.
okay, that was worth my money. That was worth my time. That was worth me coming here. And when we kind of have that discussion, almost always at the end of that discussion, they want to feel peaceful.
Yeah.
They want to feel peaceful. And so as we move through these things, one of the big gauges that I use is this person feeling more peaceful in their life? One of the things that people will describe to me all the time, as far as when you're asking about efficacy, is, Doc, my problems aren't any different, but I'm in a bigger boat. I still have the same waves hitting me. I'm in the same ocean. I'm in the same turbulence, but I'm not in a rowboat anymore. I'm not feeling like I'm just going to turn over and go to the bottom of the sea. I'm in a bigger boat. I don't feel the anxiety and the depression and the, my gosh, I'm doomed kind of thing happening.
So maybe those things that would typically happen that would trigger a really strong emotional response in the brain, they may still happen, but it doesn't hit the same.
Yeah, more resilience, more peacefulness, more. I'll ask them about their connections in their life, and they'll start to tell me, man, my wife and I are getting along so much better, and I can't believe how we're communicating, and I respond differently.
Wow.
All kinds of things as far as I feel like ketamine and our clinic has saved so many marriages and careers, and not to mention suicide. Um, uh, Ketamine in our clinic has about a 95% success rate of having that suicidal ideation go away. And that's
That's
incredible.
huge.
In our hospital now at the behavioral medicine unit, we finally have instituted ketamine as a first line therapy for people that show up in our emergency room feeling suicidal. Um, all throughout the Yale hospital system, that's the first line of therapy for people coming in saying, I don't want to be here anymore, or they've attempted
Really?
suicide, because it's so amazingly effective at taking away that emotional energy of, I quit, I don't want to be here. Um, so, so yeah, I think, and that's some of my most rewarding patients are those patients. Um, I have a patient that had circled the calendar. She was kind of the person in her business that everyone looked to. She'd bring goodies in for everyone, knew everybody's name. No one knew that she was struggling so bad, but the world just kept feeling weightier and weightier and weightier. And she described getting out the calendar and looking at the month that she had ahead of her. And decided that's the day. And she started quietly preparing for that day and starting to, hey, I'm going to give things away. I'm going to say my quiet goodbyes, not in a way that would trip everybody up, but but that's my way of saying goodbye. And luckily, the day before that circled date, she went into a restaurant and saw a friend that she hadn't seen in a long time. And that friend said, before she even got her mouth open, "What's the matter with you?" And she opened up, and this friend luckily had done ketamine. And so she told her about ketamine, and she ended up calling our office, and we got her in that day. And I mean, just to see the change in this woman and how things happened, she was literally 24 hours away. Well, that day turned out to not be her ending. It turned out to be the beginning of a new
Wow.
path, which is really powerful.
I mean, that gave me chills, just you sharing that, just how it changed somebody's
Yeah.
life. Like, that's amazing.
I mean, I make so much less than I used to make. Doing all the things that I used to do at the hospital and being on committees and flying to New York to be on, or New York to Salt Lake to be on boards. Um, I make less money, but I am so passionate about what I do, and I love it. As we were talking earlier before this interview, if your passion is making money, you're going to be burned out. You're going to lose that passion over time. There is never enough money to satiate your desire, if that's what your desire is. If your desire is, I want to have my creativity be my passion, I want to help others as my passion, that's the spot where burnout can still happen. But man, I'd rather burn out doing that.
Yeah, I love it. And you're helping people in some of the biggest challenges that they've had, and they get to see that maybe there's a different path. I
I
love it.
just went to a graduation of a 18-year-old girl. Her mother called me, and if you're under 18, you're under the age of consent. And so there's no reason why we can't do children for this necessarily in my mind, but children have more developing brains. So we worry about giving them something that's a brain altering medication, of course. I use 15 as the cutoff in my clinic, and there's no great double blind prospective studies to help me guide me on that. But that's the age that most ketamine clinics use. So, kind of as trying to not get too far outside the standard of care, that's what I do. But this mother had called me, and she's like, my daughter just attempted suicide again, and she was in the hospital, and they had to pump her stomach, blah 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 blah,
Wow.
horrible stuff. And she was reaching out to us, and I said, well, does she have a psychiatrist? Does she have a mental health provider? If you're under 18, I kind of require that in my clinic so that I feel more covered.
Yeah.
She said no, but I don't think she's going to make it through the week. And so we got her in. She was 15, and I won't go into too many details about her, but she showed up with this shirt on that said "Suicide Boys," and that was her mentality. She was on her way out, and here we are 3 years later. and just went to her high school graduation.
It's incredible. What was that like when you saw her graduate?
Beautiful.
You're lucky to have found you. That's amazing.
That's why I love
Why
it.
the money's not the important part.
Yeah.
It's the life-changing moments that you create there from it.
I don't apologize for my emotions. I just love her, and I feel so badly that modern medicine, is failing our children,
Yes.
and modern society is failing our children. And I think there's a better way. Um, and I hope that we can come around and do something different. But I'm doing my little part.
I love it. I love it. That's amazing. In your experience, who tends to respond best to this type of therapy?
We still have failures. I wish everybody responded to it. We have about a 10 to 15% failure rate, depending on what we're treating. And of course, we feel horrible when what we have provided hasn't done it. So we try to find other things that we can help.
Yeah.
We don't just, well, that didn't work, so good luck. We try to, steer people in a better direction for something else. Ketamine isn't the answer for everybody.
Yeah.
But I can never predict who's in that 10 to 15%. You'd think, well, this person's going to be amazing for ketamine. Well, they might fall into that 10 to 15%.
It's one of those, right? It's something worth trying.
If people have good support structures, I've had homeless men their wives have kicked them out, and they're living in their car, and they've lost their jobs. And well, is that person going to have as much success as someone with a more healthy support structure around them? Probably not. Um, but so you can kind of say, well, gosh, this is going to be a tough case. People that have substance abuse issues in their lives, ketamine, actually, we don't advertise ourselves as a rehab agency, but I think in the future, you're going to see ketamine being a big part of rehabilitation for people with substance abuse issues. I've appeared on a few podcasts talking just about that. Before I started my ketamine clinic, I was very concerned about giving people a short-term solution, but a longer-term problem of some sort of addiction issue.
Mm.
And ketamine, it can be a drug of abuse, just like anything can be a drug of abuse. Water can kill you if you drink too much of it, as hazing incidences in college are shown. So that's why it took me a year and a half of looking at it before I decided I wanted to jump in. I started the hospital's first chronic pain clinic and ran it for over a decade before they tapped me to do other things. And that was my whole goal, was to get people off of their narcotics. So many doctors give patients narcotics. It's a short-term solution for something, but it creates this incredible long-term problem for them. I didn't want that.
The addiction to the pills and
Yeah, and believe it or not, people that are substance abusing don't always tell you that right up front. They come into your clinic and they don't tell you that that's what they're doing. But I have a lot of patients that, if that's the issue, they'll come back and say, Doc, was that supposed to help me with my alcohol use? Or was that supposed to help me with my cannabis use? Or was that supposed to get me off whatever they're doing? And it doesn't have to just be drugs either. It can be pornography. It can be other things that people are diverting their mind with to get it away from this problem I can't solve over here, that gap that we talked about.
yeah.
Addiction is such a interesting aspect of medicine, and I think ketamine's amazing for addiction issues. So we help people with that as well. Um, I don't know if you can tell or not, but I'm a little bit passionate about this particular medicine.
Yes, I can feel it. I think anybody who's watching it will be able to feel it as well. And I think that it means a lot. It's very important to you. What are some most common misconceptions that you find yourself having to correct when people come in?
The addiction issue, especially if
Okay.
people have been sober for some length of time. People will come in and say, Doc, I've been 2 years sober and I'm in my AA program. I don't want something that's going to trigger me. But I think one of the reasons I was using alcohol was because I've been self-medicating.
Hmm.
And is it safe for me to do this? After 5 years of experience now, I can absolutely tell them, you're fine. Go ahead and let's get you started. We're not going to trigger you to jump back into substance abuse issues. In fact, it'll be the exact opposite. If we can get you feeling good and get your brain working right and have it functioning on a different path and a different level, why would you want to self-medicate if you feel good?
Right.
Why would you? So Um, that's one big misconception. Another one is, well, am I going to get addicted to ketamine even if they don't have an addiction issue? And that's just not the case at all. People will come in and say, well, isn't this some sort of veterinary medicine? And I'll have to remind them, well, a lot of medicines that the veterinarians use came from, human physiology and human pharmacology. And yes, the veterinarians love ketamine because they can give it to a horse and the horse just stands there and its mind goes somewhere else and they can sew it up or do something to it. But no, this isn't just a horse tranquilizer. I'll have people come in and really be thinking that ketamine is just a magic bullet. And I try to educate them that you can't just show up at some strip mall, get some ketamine, and everything's going to be okay. This needs to be an integrative process. It needs to be, you need to find someone that's really good at it. You need to find someone that's also going to help you with the other balance issues in your life, like hormones and psychological balance and other things to um, get you that homeostasis that brings peacefulness.
Yes.
And then a lot of people that prescribe traditional medicine, the FDA just removed, for example, 20 black box warnings on hormone replacement products for women. And it turned out that all of the old thinking was garbage. And so they had to finally remove it. I remember graduating from medical school and my dean got up there and said, half of everything we've taught you is crap in my graduation, and right in front of all our parents and everything. It's like, my gosh, I got a lot of student loans for half of everything that I paid for is crap. And the second statement was what really got me. He said, and we don't know which half. And that has become so true to me over my 30-year career. I thought, gosh, I'm going to get out there and I know what I'm doing. Um, the traditional way of treating patients is dismal. The traditional way of treating depression is dismal. And so many of these medicines have so many problems associated with them. And so many of the drugs that get FDA approved get yanked off the market. So there's a problem with our system in general. And so I love being the guy that's trying to help people, but I don't really enjoy being the guy that's out on the fringe a little bit, trying to bring medicine my direction. For 5 years, we've been treating people hormonally like we should. And then the FDA finally got up with us. And same thing I think is going to happen with ketamine. I think ketamine will get its FDA approval. It's just going to take some time.
Wow. What if somebody's like, maybe they're watching this and they're kind of nervous or unsure? Like, what do you tell them to so that they can make a good decision for themselves?
Well, I think most of my patients are in that category. When they show up, they're pretty nervous about this. I
Normal.
mean, and a lot of my patients have anxiety disorder that are sitting in the chair across from me. So why wouldn't they be anxious about it? Anxiety's fear of the unknown and fear of something that I haven't experienced. And
Right.
excuse me. So I know for me personally and for my patients, the more education that we have, the less anxiety we have. The more we feel like I've got someone that knows what they're doing, helping me helps to alleviate their fears. So because this is a labor of love for me, I never charge people for a consult. If we sit down together and I'm trying to figure out, is this good for you or not? I give free consults for people for that to remove. Hey, he's just trying to get my money. I want to remove that from the equation so that if this is good for you, great. And if it's not, hey, and if I don't think it is, away we go. But so I do free consults to try to alleviate people's fear and to relieve their anxiety. And I love educating people about what's going on with them and trying to help them with that. I think helping to educate yourself, reading more about ketamine, and our website has a lot about ketamine. And there's a lot of more mainstream media sources that are coming out with very positive reviews about ketamine and why it's so helpful for people. Um, so educate yourself would be my first thing. And I really don't want to take someone back and just start delivering ketamine to them until they have a pretty good, reasonable understanding of what we're trying to do
Hmm.
and reasonable expectations of what ketamine can and can't do, and what they're going to experience. And then I have patients that are so passionate about it. They're like, anybody you have that's nervous, just let them call me and I'll talk to them. And because I was super nervous and didn't want to come either. And my wife finally pushed me into it, and
It's incredible.
it's changed my life. So read people's reviews about what it's done for them. That that they put out on our website. Our website has a lot of information if people want to go and look at it. And if you want to get more technical, it's got great studies that it points to. If you don't,
Desert Sands.
Desert Sands
Ketamine.com.
Ketamine.com.
You want to pull that up really quick, Kara?
Yeah, Desert Sands Ketamine.com has a lot of information about me, about our clinic, about ketamine in general. And then if you're a little more detail oriented, and my gosh, I've got PhDs that want to read everything that I'm telling before they decide to jump in on it. Great. I post studies on there. I've got research from Yale posted on there. I've got lots of more detailed brain chemistry stuff on there if you're that kind of a person. And then at some point, though, we have to take a leap of faith, and we have to, if everything else hasn't worked for us, and you're feeling you're struggling, sometimes we have to take a leap of faith.
Yeah.
And do it.
So the website is desertsandsketamine.com. And it looks like you've got a button there. So if somebody wants to do a free consultation, then they can click that. Where you want to click that really quick there, Kara? So then they can click that, give you some information, and then
all they do is fill that out, and then it gets to my front office staff. They'll give you a call and talk you through the process of how you get into our process. I do require people to do a little bit of work on their own, which is filling out a couple of forms for medical history and what the drugs they're taking, so that we can have a more productive consultation. But yeah, that's the first step in jumping in. And then we get you in the clinic, show you the clinic, talk to you for a while, make sure that this is the right fit for you, make sure there aren't any contraindications or problems with it, make sure that there's not other things that we're missing. And then we move forward if it's a good fit. So that's the process of getting into the system. And then we try to work on balance as we move through this process. That word balance is such a key. It's hormonal balance, it's psychological balance. One of the laws of thermodynamics is that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So if a Christian comes into my office and you're having this and this and this, and oh my gosh, I'm just so weighed down over here. Well, that's all true. But if you truly believe what I'm trying to tell you here, and this is woven throughout all of human experience, whether it's the law of thermodynamics, whether it's Chinese yin and yang, that balance to the nature and the universe, whether you've read a scripture that says there must needs to be opposition in all things, whether you watch Star Wars of the good force and the bad force, this high concept of balance, we've got to get your brain to believe that yes, I've got all those things, I've got all these struggles, I've got all that stuff, but I also have all this stuff too. And you're not paying attention to this stuff. And we've got to get you more focused and balanced so that it doesn't feel so lopsided. You would never walk out on a tightrope with a pole like that's that unbalanced. What would you feel as you're standing there on the building? You'd feel, I don't want to go out there in my day. I don't want to step out there. I'm going to have so much anxiety. Maybe I'll just quit. I'm not going to do this. And that's a visualization that I use with patients all the time, is visualizing themselves as soon as they wake up as a tightrope walker. And if I could just give somebody just a quick, do we have any more time for? Yeah, go ahead. This is such a useful tool, I think, for when you first wake up in the morning. If I wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh my gosh, what time is it? How did I sleep? My program's starting to load up in my brain. And if I had an EEG on my brain right then, man, you'd see those brain waves starting to change. I see that in the operating room all the time as I'm moving people through different stages of sleep. And as your brain waves start to change in the program and that software is being loaded up, I'm Eric again. I was unconscious. Now I'm Eric. How did I sleep? What time is it? How much time do I have to lay here? Oh my gosh, what about that lady that was so suicidal yesterday? Oh my gosh, my quarterlies are due. Oh my gosh, I've got this, I've got that. Blah, blah, blah. I better get up. Jump up, I jump in the shower, and I can't even enjoy that nice hot water that's been piping through there. I don't have time for this shower. My gosh, look at all I've got to do. My brain's going like crazy. Kings didn't have hot, beautiful water rolling in 100 years ago in their castles, and there I am standing there with this. I can enjoy that. Well, if that's how you start your day, good luck. We've got to start it in a more balanced way. So this little meditation is so helpful for my patients and for me and for people that I try to, and maybe any viewer, this is just such a quick tool that you might be able to put into your toolbox. First thing when you wake up in the morning and that program is going to start to load, use it. I'm Eric again, and I'll lie there and I'll stop for a second though, and I'll get my consciousness in charge of my emotional center. I'll say, I'll picture myself exactly in that scenario, and I want you to picture yourself exactly in that scenario that I was talking about. Close your eyes and visualize yourself standing on a building. There's the building. There's my feet on it. See your feet on it. Visualize the rope going across to the building over there. And in your mind, tell your mind, this is this morning, and that is tonight when I get to go unconscious again. And this rope represents my day. And I need to do this in a balanced way. You're not very balanced. Your
Mm,
job isn't to be balanced. My job is to balance you. Your job is to problem solve and worry about these things over here. Well, we're going to be very anxiety ridden during the day if I let you run amok on me. So let's do this together. So I'll ask my brain, I'm going to think of some things, and then I want you to send me the appropriate emotions for them. I'm in charge, not you. I'm going to think of some things. So if I've got a patient that has severe anxiety, I'll have them picture, why do you have this anxiety? Think about it. And the things that'll come to their mind is, what's their appropriate emotion for? Hi, I'm Mary and I have severe panic attacks and anxiety. A lot of the times what'll come to their mind is guilt. My
mm,
gosh, this is really affecting my marriage. This is really affecting my children. It's fear. What if I never get a hold of this? It's what we would term negative emotions. Negative emotions are actually really good for us. We call them negative emotions, but go ahead, feel those. Any psychiatrist or therapist that tells you, well, quit thinking about that stuff so much, that's just not realistic. So put your hands out while you're lying there. This is a 5-minute exercise and start thinking of some things and assigning the appropriate emotions over here. If you're struggling with your finances, if you're struggling with your marriage, if you're struggling with whatever, put it over there and feel the weight of it and feel your hand go down and start assigning the appropriate thing for it. And sometimes it's anger, sometimes it's frustration, sometimes it's confusion. It's all the things that are negative things that we call
mhm,
negative. Great. Your brain's going to do that all day long anyway. So let it happen and have it happen first thing in the morning. But that is not when you get up and get going. You stop for a second, like, yep, all those are true. Now, what am I going to put over here to counterbalance that? There must needs
mm,
be opposition in all things. So I'm going to start thinking of some things, and you're going to give me the emotions for those too. Um, and so for me, I don't know for you, Christian, I just barely met you, but for me, I'll look over at my wife of 30 plus years when I'm doing this little exercise in the morning, and I'll close my eyes again and I'll think, man, 30 plus years we've been in this foxhole fighting with and for each other. That's pretty dang amazing. And that feels, what's the right emotion for that? Gratitude and kind of a little bit of awe that anybody would want to
yeah,
spend 30 years of their life with me. And then it's a feeling of unconditional love. How do I know that? Because we've had conditions. Every day's not the dang lottery. And so I feel that unconditional love over there. And then I'll think of my children every time that I have 3 children and they're out of the house now. And I'll close my eyes and picture them in their onesies holding them. And I'll
mm,
picture them running up to me when I used to come home from the hospital late at night. Dad's home and be so excited. Their little jammies running on the tile. I'll picture them as teenagers, which was a whole different experience and interesting. And I'll picture them as adults now. They're not perfect people, but man, are they perfect? Both in spite and because of me. Um, and why do I think of them? Because that's as close as I'm ever going to get to unconditional love. I think that's the pinnacle of the reason to be here is to understand unconditional love. And that takes a lifetime to understand that and lots of conditions. So I'll think of that. I'll think of silly things like, man, I grew up pretty poor. I'll think about my refrigerator as a kid, empty. And then I think of my refrigerators now. I think we have 7 of them between our 2 places that I have and our trailer. And blah. I'm like, my God, why do we have so many refrigerators? I think we throw away more food than I eat. And so for me, that's something I think about. I'll think about spirituality for the first time in my life now, and that feels super weighty and heavy over here. I don't understand it. What's the right emotion? Awe and gratitude that I can get downloads beyond my pay grade. I can get inspiration when I need it. And I'm really in awe of some of the things that have happened over the last 5 years of my life. Um, when it doesn't have to be perfect, but when you feel like, okay, yes, I do have all these struggles, fears, anxieties, angers, all these things over here, but I also have all this over here. Okay, I'm balanced enough now to step out onto my day. Then visualize yourself taking a step out in a very peaceful way. My gosh, when people get really good at tightrope walking, they do it with someone on their head on a bike.
mhm,
Well, if you're not there yet, just step out there with this nice pole that's balanced and give it a shot today. At the end of the day, I want you to do that same 5-minute recon at the end of the day when you're lying in your bed. Put your hands out and do the same thing. What was I thinking about this morning? Oh, yeah, blah, 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 blah. What was I thinking about over here? Oh, yeah, man, that was a tough day. I guarantee if you're lying there like, I am so grateful to be in bed. That was a tough day.
Mm-hmm.
Your brain was over here all day working on all this stuff.
Yeah.
And if you do that little recon, you'll ask yourself, did I even connect with my wife today? Did I do anything special for her? Did I look in her eyes and really connect with her? No, I don't even think I hardly interact with her at all. Did I reach out to my kids? Did I eat my food and have gratitude? Or was I doing it while I was doing my taxes? Did I magnify spirituality in my life at all today? I do that by trying to help others. Nope, I just was really focused on these things. All right, that's not the time to beat yourself up or to get upset. It's like, man, I've got a good brain. I have a really good brain that does what it's supposed to do. I didn't do what I was supposed to do, which was be that better rudder.
Mm.
All right, brain, we're going to set this down. That's not how we want to do it every day. We did it and you're good at winging it, but that's not
Yeah.
how I like to feel. So we're going to do it again tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And I'll visualize myself like those mirrors that you see yourself just disappearing in the future. I'll picture myself picking this thing up every day. And I'll remind my brain, you better get used to this. And we need to do this in a better way.
Yeah.
If I get into bed, I'm like, that was an amazing day. I guarantee you that I had all of these components and these components together. These are necessary. If your brain is like, well, wouldn't it be great if you didn't have any of those? I love sitting on the beach in Hawaii. But if you made me do that for 30 days and just sit there and look at the ocean, a week feels amazing. Someone bringing me a little umbrella drink and a week feels amazing, but then oh, by the way, you got to sit here for 30 days. All right, I think I can do that. By the end of 30 days, you're just, holy crap. What if they walked up and said, now it's 365, you got to sit here for another year?
It feels like a prison.
Oh my gosh, I think I want to kill myself. I'm so anxiety, I'm so depressed, I'm so beat up. Even something beautiful like lack of struggle and lack of hard things can ruin you. So these things are just as necessary as these things. When they made those biodomes and wanted to have people live so green and peacefully in there, the trees ended up falling over. Well, why? There was no wind. They didn't think about that. Oh, we got to have wind. Trees need feedback for better tap roots and better root systems. That's necessary. Astronauts blast into our atmosphere, out of our atmosphere, and it's like, oh, they start losing bone mass and muscle mass immediately. We need resistance.
Mm.
So that balance concept is such a key thing. If you can get that in, that I need these things, I need these hard things. It's for the metric that I truly value, which is unconditional love, patience, empathy, forgiveness, all of those beautiful things. And that gap is about forgiveness. If I'm doing my best, I better forgive myself if this is my thing and this is where I feel like I'm at.
I love that because sometimes we think happiness is the absence of all of those things.
That's exactly the opposite.
It's really not. It's the balance of them from what we're
As
saying.
somebody that's retired, I was so stressed out during my job, and there's about four stages of retirement. The first stage is, man, we're on vacation. I'm done. It's like you felt like it's your week vacation in Hawaii. And pretty soon after, typically it's about a year, patients will start calling me and come in and they're like, I'm freaking lost. Oh my gosh, the vacation's over. I need to have something productive. I need to have some problem to solve. I need to have something that gives me some sort of meaning and passion. I can't just freaking play golf every day for the rest of my life. And then it starts working through these different stages. The fourth one, if they can reach it, is a beautiful stage. But no, we need that. We need this side to be balanced just as much as this side. You're just as pathologic, just as in a hard place if you don't have these struggles over here.
Mm-hmm. Well, that makes a lot of sense. It's funny because a couple of years ago, I was just had kind of a stressful time in work, and then I thought about just retiring then, and I was like 41. You know, I was like, I'm just going to retire now. I don't want to deal with this stuff. So I took a month off, and I got bored. And then it was like I realized, it was just that realization that it's not just about going, making money. It's about I love being busy, and I like solving problems, and I like that. So it made me view the problems differently. Before, it was just like, man, there's just problem after problem after problem. I just don't want any problems. So I think the absence of problems is going to bring me happiness.
So it's in the balance, isn't it?
It's in the balance.
If your brain is designed for problem solving and then you try to remove all the problems by quitting, getting rid of, don't need anything, that brain is going to be so bored. And there is nothing more um, pathologic and dangerous than a bored brain. It'll
Yeah.
create problems for you.
Then you don't get excited about solving them.
Right. It'll create problems
It'll
and
create
it'll
other
create problems that you don't necessarily expect or want. How many midlife crises
Yeah.
end in divorce because I'm bored and my brain's trying to create me problems.
Right.
So it's in the balance. I think that's such a key concept. And then do you have time for maybe a 2 minute?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if you still,
Yeah.
I don't know if we still got,
I had the
where we're-
I had a meeting that I just pushed back a little bit, so we're
okay.
good.
That's nice of you, Christian.
I'm really enjoying
One more
learning.
story that I love. My mother works over here at M&S Turquoise on the Boulevard, which is just kind of right by you guys.
Mhm.
She's worked there. She's 80 plus years old and she just still loves to go in there. And she loves the Native Americans bringing in this jewelry that they make. And the way that they make it, it's kind of in tune to their idea of earth and all that kind of stuff. But the way that they make it is they take turquoise and semi-precious stones and they put it in a rock grinder with hard grinding things. That's what gives it its polish. That's what gives it its beauty. That's what gives it its value. If they had, well, I don't want it to be so grinding. I don't want it to be so hard. Let's put it in there with toilet paper and some cotton balls. That is useless. It's going to come out looking exactly like you just put it in. So there is a process to make that, and there's a process to make us. Hard grinding things are good for us if we tell our brains, quit telling me that it isn't that case. Our brains will lie to us all the time. This is too hard. You don't want to do this. When the triathletes were here and I was talking to some of those triathletes for the Ironman, to a person, they would say at some point, my brain was telling me, quit. My gosh, you're hurting, your ankle hurts, or why are we doing this? Or what's the motivation for this whole thing? Or you're going to poop your pants, or whatever it may be that was their brain. And there's a higher order function that has to rise up and say, be quiet over there. Um, Hard grinding things, they don't destroy us and we don't let them destroy us, can be amazingly polishing, can be amazingly beautiful. We could come out incredibly valuable out of it if we just stop pushing so hard. If I go to a movie and there's my patient up there on the screen and it's like, oh man, Jake is in real trouble. This is the movie of his life. And this is based after a real story, just like the movies we go to. I never turn to my wife and say, well, the hero's screwed. Let's get out of here. I have a little faith in the director. I have a little faith that they made this movie for some reason. And I sit back and I have a little popcorn and just try to let it unfold. So many of my patients are so anxiety ridden about solving their problems right now. How about sit back a little bit, have a little popcorn, let the thing unfold, have a little faith in the director of the thing. Slow your wavelengths down, slow your energy down, slow your brain's wanting to say, this is good, that is bad. I took my mother-in-law to the beach. She lives in Montana that we were talking about. She didn't go to the beach. She's a good swimmer, but she doesn't go to the beach. And I was setting up the thing in North Carolina where we were at, actually South Carolina. And I looked around and there she was disappearing out into the ocean. She got caught in a riptide.
Oh.
And she was swimming as hard as she could get back to the shore.
Wow.
And I ran down there and was screaming, swim to the right, swim to the right, because I could see the riptide going out and here's their path coming back. And what does she want though? There's the beach. That's where I want to go. And so many of my patients are like that. Yeah, but I want my relationship with my daughter to be like this, or I want my this, I want this, I want this gap closed. And you're swimming so dang hard to do it and people die in riptides all the time because that's where I want to go. If they would just float for a second, just stop for a minute and just float with it and look around a little bit. Oh, there's a path over there to what I want. That's going to be much easier, but that's not what we do. That's where I want to go. That's what I want. And we'll swim and push and oh my gosh, get anxiety ridden and depressed because we're not, and sometimes even kill us, just like a riptide. So that's the last thing I guess I'd want to leave with you is sometimes we just have to float. Sometimes we just have to hold on a minute. And I think that's what such a beautiful thing about ketamine is it just lets you float for a minute. It just lets you float without all of that. Yeah, but it's just, no, We're going to unplug things for a minute and let your brain float for a minute and see what that feels like. Look around a little bit. Is there a better path? Is there a better neural pathway? Is there a better way to solve this? Is there something outside of myself that I'm hearing from someone that's maybe a little colder, wiser soul than me that's pushing me in a better
Yeah.
direction? Um, Hopefully that makes sense.
I love it. Thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate it. If you guys like what you saw there, please like and subscribe, and then give me some comments down below as well. What was your takeaway from this? I thought it was absolutely amazing, and you shared so much there. And thanks for sharing the story about the 15-year-old. That was absolutely amazing. So
Thank you. I really appreciate your time.
yes.